Welcome, everybody. We are back. We are with Justin Copey, CEO of Innovative Solutions. Justin, can you kind of introduce yourself to the audience, give them a little background, tell them what you're up to?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm Justin Copey. I'm the CEO of Innovative Solutions in Rochester, New York. We are part managed service provider, part software development shop, part IT consulting firm. We have customers throughout the Eastern and Central time zones, been in business for about 30 years. And I tell people, probably the primary thing that I do every single day in being responsible for the 70 hearts that call Innovative home is really work toward creating just an incredible culture and environment for people to really embrace and find fulfillment in the work that they are so passionately drawn to.
Well, that sounds awesome. So I'm kind of curious if you were to zero in on that, what would you say is like the one or two or three major things you're doing that really connect with these people? That's a broad group. I don't know how long it took you to get up to that number, but that's kind of tough because my experience is each individual kind of views personal fulfillment a little bit differently.
Oh my goodness, you're telling me. So, yeah, the two things that I probably obsess over, I'm almost maniacal about, are providing a clear sense of direction for every person in the organization and for obviously our customers. And then the second thing that I do is I am obsessed with making sure people find safety in expressing opinions, exploring what they feel is most important, giving them the autonomy to choose to do the right thing without asking for permission. And, that's loaded with activities, lots and lots of different things, from employee one-on-ones to making sure that my leadership team has what they need in order to empower their managers and their direct reports, to going and visiting with customers and understanding what they really see happening in their business, and how we can better align our service offerings and making sure we're bringing the right people to the table.
So I'm kind of curious, with 75 people you're growing, how many people are you going to plan to hire this year?
So this year we'll add probably another net new 11 people, which is fairly significant. We, like many organizations in the tech space right now, we've gone all in on the cloud. We're an AWS premier partner, meaning that we're in the upper echelon of partners that both configure, consult, and resell AWS cloud-based services. And in doing so, we need a lot of talent, and we need good talent that we can help cultivate and grow, so that our customers have the skills that they need in order to move their businesses forward with technology.
So I'm curious, you're going to hire 11 people, you got 75, very dynamic culture. Are you looking at senior people and mid-range, lower level, even college interns, that type of thing, or do you zero in on one of those groups? Because I find a lot of times some people are like, I can't hire experienced people because they're stuck in their ways, or they say, I got to have experienced people because I need them to know X, whatever. What have you
Yeah,
found?
it's a great question. And for our culture, we find that having a culture that's lopsided, like all millennials or the majority of us being a certain age bracket, it really actually holds us back. So the roles and the positions that we're hiring range from entry level interns or co-ops from universities like the Rochester Institute of Technology here in Western New York, all the way up through senior cloud architects that maybe have history of legacy-based systems that they've supported and now want to understand how to sharpen their skills for the cloud. And it's everything in between. And I feel a great responsibility on our part to make sure that the organization is mixed, both generationally, but also with folks that just bring to the table a lot of different ideas and ways of looking at the world. We find that diversity really helps us be more dynamic and helps everybody grow.
That's great. So what are the biggest issues that you come up with in between the generations, or the different communication skills, behavioral styles?
Well, I mean, you got the things that I think we all experience from, maybe a younger generation that wants to find instant gratification, like I had somebody come to my office just a couple of days ago and say, listen, I've been here for 3 months and I haven't impacted enough, or I haven't had a big enough impact. It's like, well, you've been here for 3 months. I'm glad you're up to speed now. Now let's talk about some ways that you can find fulfillment in making an impact. To some older generations that may be a little bit set in their ways, but have a tremendous amount of wisdom, and helping them understand that that wisdom can be shared and passed down or even up, depending. And really making sure that everybody understands that, at the end of the day, the ball that we're focusing on isn't in the organization, it's the customer. It's what the customer is trying to do, and that's the common theme. And one way or the other, we need to find a way to work together and ultimately bring solutions to the table that make sense.
Okay, well, that sounds great. Now, I noticed in your bio on LinkedIn, you do a lot of speaking. So, that's not always the case with people who are leading an organization with 75 people. Kind of why are you doing that, and what are you doing? Kind of talk to us about that. I'm kind of curious.
Sure. So I speak probably on average once or twice a month. It's a commitment that I made about a year and a half ago, as I was finding that as we were able to get the message out about what our organization does and who we support, that there were a lot of lessons learned. One of my favorite things about speaking is you get a chance to meet a lot of different people you wouldn't normally have the chance to, whether that's audience members or folks that are helping coordinate it. So it's something that I prioritize, but it's also something that the employees at my organization also like to learn more about, because what I like to do in any speaking engagement is just share perspective. It's not necessarily right, it's not necessarily wrong. Some of the things I do are completely unorthodox, the way I run my business. But there's always learning in that. And in what I also like is that I could do a talk a year from now, and it's going to probably be filled with things that I never knew or thought I could do. And it gives me a good chance to reflect. And I think reflecting is something we don't do enough of. And speaking, or I know some people that write, like they write books, or they're very big into blogs. Writing's another great way for us to reflect. And so it's something that I've really enjoyed, and I'm having a lot of fun with.
And I'm kind of curious, before I ask more about the speaking, you mentioned you do some things that are totally unorthodox. Of course, that kind of sparks. What you want to give some examples?
Sure. Probably the most well-known example, anybody who knows about our organization, or I don't know, has read anything about us, is back in 2016, I bought the business from three partners. In in those days, we operated just differently. We had a very different strategy. The goals to grow the business were different, and to just kind of make a really long story short, I felt like we had an opportunity to get the right people on the bus at that point. And I didn't feel as though that we had the wrong people, but people really needed to commit. And so it was about 6 months into owning the business. I walk into a meeting with all of our employees, and I asked everybody to go interview for a new job. And everybody looked at me like, are you crazy? Like, what are you doing? What's going on? Thinking there's something else bigger underneath it. And my message was really simple. It was, listen, we've outlined a brand new strategy for this organization to move forward with. You all participated in some way, shape, or form in creating that strategy. Now is the time to commit to executing on that and going after the things that we know are really important for us and our customers. And you know what? If you're not interested, that's okay. Why don't we use this as an opportunity to just be adults? And, at the end of the day, I had about 3/4 of my organization at that time that went out and they actually interviewed. And of the 3/4 of them that did it, 12 of them, 12 that were friends, 12 that were people that I even had hired, decided to part ways with Innovative. They were not committed to what we were trying to do as a business. And it was so good for the organization. It was extremely hard, and it was riddled with so many different lessons learned. But it really forced us to raise the bar, because those 12 vacancies allowed us to bring folks in who could help us do things that we never could do before. And it really helped also give the people who stayed, who did interview, but decided that this is where they wanted to be. I tell people, if you've ever been married, it's kind of like those folks renewed their vows in a lot of ways, or in a lot of senses. And it gave them a whole new purpose to being in the organization. Yeah, that's probably the most extreme example. But I mean, I've got lots of other examples of things that we do, like being completely transparent with our financials and almost every other metric you could believe in with the exception of salary data, where people come into our organization like, wow, you share all of this? And it's like, well, yeah, we want everybody to understand where they are, where their part is in moving this ball forward. So yeah, it's just a little bit of a snippet.
So you bought the company in 2016, and this was about 6 months later. How many employees did you have when you bought it? How many did you have when you did this proposal?
Yeah, so it was about 50 employees at the time, 50. And yeah, 12 of them ended up over the course of 12 weeks. Everybody wanted their day. So every Friday for 12 weeks through the end of the year, somebody came into my office in the afternoon, letter of resignation. Here was the crazy part, David. People would say to me, like 10 out of 12 of them had said to me, you know what? I love where the company is going. I love the vision. I just don't think the company's there yet. Do you mind if I come back in a couple of years? Like, people would legitimately ask me that. And I would always say to them, sure. I mean, if there's an opportunity to work together again, why not? And, I keep in touch with some of those folks. Many of them no longer. And that's okay. You can't, you can't please everybody. And
Yeah.
that was a really big lesson learned for me, stepping into the shoes of, at that point, new ownership and CEO role.
Well, I think it was really bold and very wise of you. Basically, you made it so everybody had to be on the same page.
Yeah,
And that's where cultures fall apart, is they
so
just
true.
take too long to encourage someone to move on who is not fully bought in or not carrying their weight, type of
I,
thing. So smart move, smart move. So explain a little bit about your speaking, because obviously if you're doing a lot of speaking, you got some great things to say. I don't know whether you want to talk about what you're sharing out there on the road or where you've been and what struck you, but wherever you want to
Sure.
go, I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, no, sure. So, my speaking engagements are typically about entrepreneurship, some of the struggles that we all face as entrepreneurs that probably wouldn't be too eye-opening for anybody who listens to this podcast. But one of the things that I talk a lot about is just this need to wake up, in the sense, like, I meet so many people. I meet actually a lot of entrepreneurs, quite frankly, that they're riding out their business. They're trying to increase their valuation for some payday at the end. And whether you call it a lifestyle business, whether you call it, people are just coasting. It's amazing to me how many people are. It's like they're sleeping at the wheel. And you know, one of the things that I fortunately had the opportunity to learn early on was, if we're not conscious to the decisions that we're making, things pass really quick. And I just think it's a really unfortunate set of circumstances when you're not taking control of your situation. We all have one life. I mean, as cliche as that may sound. And so a lot of my talks go into my belief that, to do anything significant, you have to do it with other people. That if you want to be relevant, you have to adapt or you will die. That the place between your emotions and logic is usually the place where everything makes complete sense. It's not just emotion or logic. That your biography is not your destiny. Like, where you came from is not where you're necessarily going. And finding purpose is probably paramount to anything else. Like, if you don't know why the hell you're here, well, I don't really know what you're doing. And I'm a big believer, probably lastly, that, if you think big and you go all in on things, there is so much more to take out of it than not. And so a lot of the engagements that I have the opportunity to speak at I will touch on all six of those things and provide some examples and give people an opportunity to also connect and share some of their own experiences, because I think that's how we learn best.
Yeah, it's interesting. I spoke at an event a couple of years ago, and there was a guy who came up to me, and I was saying something similar about being stuck. And he said, "You know, my business has been at about $1 million for 20 years." And I was like, "Whoa!" I said, "You need to do something. You know, whether you work with me, somebody else, but you need to do something."
Yeah, I'm
Eh,
with you on that. I mean,
yeah.
like, I tell this one story. So we're in Western New York, in Rochester. We sit between Buffalo and Syracuse. We get a lot of snow. We get all four seasons. But one of the things that Rochester, New York is known for, this is the place where Eastman Kodak was founded. George Eastman from Rochester built the company here. And my company, my business, Innovative Solutions, we reside, our offices reside in an old Kodak building that sits on a campus, beautiful campus along the Genesee River. And we love being in the building for so many reasons. But one of the things that I remind everybody of is do not forget the building that we call home. Kodak is such a great example of a company that was quite frankly not willing to cannibalize its own business, and the market ended up cannibalizing them, and they are nothing like they used to be. And I mean, they invented the digital camera. That's the irony in all of it. That Kodak invented the digital camera in 1976. It sat on a shelf. They never marketed it. They didn't develop it because they felt as though it was going to cannibalize their film business. And then by the late 90s, it was too late. And by the early 2000s, they were getting ready for bankruptcy. And I mean, that is just such a stark example. And it's ironic. We sit in a building that was obviously once owned by them, but we use it as a great reminder to always stay relevant and to rest on your laurels, and to just kind of think that, like, the way we've always done it got us to where we are and we're good. Man, there's just so many examples around us where it just proves out that that's not the case, especially in a day like today in 2020.
Yeah, and what a double benefit to be on that campus.
Yeah, yeah,
Have the
without a
beauty of the
doubt.
campus, and then also to have the story to kind of reinforce that. I'm curious, as you've gone out and spoken in different places with different groups, have there been any of those groups that's really touched you in some way, or taught you something?
Yeah, so I did. It's interesting. Every talk I do, I get something out of it. I mean, every talk. From probably the most consistent talk that I give is over at the Rochester Institute of Technology. It's annually to a group of aspiring entrepreneurs. It's always a class of 70 or 80. And they always have these amazing questions you couldn't make up if you tried. And I always walk away reflecting and learning something. Um, but one of the talks that I had a chance to do, and it was more of an experience than a speaking engagement, as I guess how I would describe it. But I was asked to come out to Susanville, California, and this is north of Lake Tahoe, and it's in the middle of nowhere, and it's a prison town. There's nothing else that exists in this town other than the prison. And I was invited to come speak to 150, 160 men who were incarcerated, and it was over a 2-day period that I was able to visit. And I got to tell you, it was riveting. I had never really been in a prison, not at all like this before. This is a supermax prison, and I remember every detail of this experience. And one of the most significant stories, and I will not spoil it for your audience because I tell the story at my during my keynotes that I give. But one of the most inspiring stories was a gentleman who I had met who was incarcerated, who, in one of the most unique ways you could ever imagine, found purpose after many, many years of being incarcerated. And when you have a chance to meet people that have gone through just such significant things in life, and some people that have gone through the most horrendous experiences in life, but have chosen to find the silver lining or the gift that exists within that. For me, that is what life is all about. It's all about learning from those who have gone before us, and really cherishing that. And that's a big reason again why I love to speak on the topic of waking up.
Yeah, it's interesting. It reminds me of a story, and the name is escaping me at the moment, but there is a very well known rehab program in San Francisco where they have a restaurant and they have all these things going on, and they've had tremendous success. Excuse me, it's I don't think it might be part rehab, but it's taking inmates from prison. And there was a guy I heard talk, and he had talked about you have to apply and you get interviewed. And he did it the first time, and he didn't pass the interview, and they wouldn't let him in.
Wow.
And he went back on the street and proved them right, by committing another crime, got another 7 years or whatever it was.
Yep.
And the next time he interviewed, he was very convincing.
Mm,
And he got into the program because he was sincere by that point. He was
yeah.
realizing with multiple, you talk about not having the purpose, getting stuck.
Yeah.
And then he had been, out, and he had gone through the program. It was very tough. And he had been successfully out and
Yeah.
productive, had purpose, but it had lasted. But he had to go through those significant trials. And it's interesting. It's striking me as I'm hearing you talk, and I'm wondering what you have to say about this, because he didn't get it for a long time. It's kind of like the guy who came up and talked to me and said, I've been at $1 million for 20 years.
Yeah.
20 years.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
He didn't get it. And I don't know
Yeah.
whether he ever got it, because I did follow up, which he asked me to do. Never returned my call, which was fine. But maybe he found
Yeah.
another outlet. I hope he did. But what
You
are
know,
your
that's a,
thoughts on that? I mean,
that's a really interesting point that you make, because I debate often, if you hit rock bottom, if life brings you to your knees, and I find in life, I meet people that have gone through just enormous struggle and piecing themselves together, following in some of the most interesting ways. I meet these folks, and some of whom I work with. And when you meet people who have gone through tragedy, ultimate tragedy, um, there is no replacement. There's no story you can read. There's no movie you can watch. There's no podcast you can listen to that replaces that feeling. And I'm a huge believer that that's a big reason that being able to experience lots of different things is so critical as a human being. Whether you've only lived in one place your entire life and you regret not ever having the chance to live on the West Coast, or whether you came into an organization and you came in at a very young age and you've worked your way up and you've been there for almost 20 years. When you don't give yourself these other experiences, I think it does limit you. And I think when you can hear what others have gone through and how they've come out of it, I think that that's what sparks us to actually either make the choice, make the leap and do something, or not. It's like, no, you know what? The payoff isn't there. But there is no replacement for experience. There's none. And to a younger generation, David, that's one of the things we talk a lot about. I know I talk a lot about it with some of our younger folks that I coach, that it's like, listen, you're in this IT role, you're providing some highly sophisticated function for a customer. Recognize, though, you don't have the experience. And that doesn't mean you're less valuable. It just means that you don't have as much perspective. And perspective is everything. When you have perspective, you can influence so much more. And, to the guy who ran his business, $1 million a year for 20 years, I guarantee you he doesn't have nearly as much perspective as maybe his neighbor who grew his business incrementally, even 5 or 10% a year, and then went bankrupt and is probably doing something else today. Like, I don't know. There's just no replacement for experience.
well, it's interesting what you're saying, because it strikes me for the first time that when you talk about perspective, So the guy who did that $1 million a year, as far as his perspective technically, because the guy who's doing that is doing a lot of the tech work, he's
Yep.
the lead
Of
tech.
course. Of course.
Technically, he's probably got fantastic perspective.
In his
But when
mind.
it but when it
Yeah.
came to life or career perspective, it was it was on autopilot, or it was in neutral or whatever. It wasn't engaged.
No.
Wasn't
No.
engaged. But it sounds like you're doing an excellent job with your 75 people there as getting that gear engaged, you know?
Yeah, well, and you know what? I think we do. I think we're very open and transparent about the fact that we expect that. And I believe for me that's the only effective way I could own and play the role of CEO in this business. It's not for everybody. And just like my company isn't for everybody. One of the other things I know that we create is somewhat of a polarizing effect. I alluded to the fact. I guess I'll expand on it a little bit. Those 12 people that left during the ask when I asked everybody to go interview, and I referenced that I don't keep in touch with all of them. Well, the reality is, many of them don't want to keep in touch with me. Many of them don't want to have anything to do with Innovative. Many of them don't want to have anything to do with the people that call Innovative home today. And that's a choice. You can run your business in a very safe, methodical, what I would call just structured and predictable way, or you can push the envelope for yourself, for your people, for your customers. You can do really amazing things with the risk you could crash and burn at any moment. And some of us choose to live one way, others choose to live it in another way, and I'm cool with either. But it is a reality, and I know, and I've been in the business long enough to know that polarizing effect, it comes with it a sharp edge, and I feel it. I do, because I take it very personally when somebody leaves the organization or says, "F you, I don't want to talk to you guys anymore."
Yeah, but it's interesting. I mean, based on your story, you didn't fire anybody. You just said,
No,
"Hey, you're either in or out." And it
yeah,
reminds me kind of Tony Hsieh with Zappos. Did you read Delivering Happiness, his book?
absolutely,
So
yeah,
remember, he's in like year 4 of this deal, tremendous growth, and then he has to make a decision that, if we're going to be based on customer service, the drop shipping from our shoe manufacturers is terrible. They're
right,
slow shipping it out. They're even worse uh, doing a return, and we got to do the returns because that's our marketing program. So he makes a decision. Okay, we're dropping 1/3 of our business, and he still more than doubles that year
right,
because he made the tough decision, not because
yeah,
he sat back.
no, exactly,
So,
exactly,
so I got some. I want to flip it a little bit, change gears because I'm still in the gearbox here with getting people in gear. But let's say you've got someone who comes in and applies at your organization, and they have something in their background that is a tarnish. Maybe it's they were fired from a job, they failed in a business, they have a record. They have a felony, or they had prior abuse, addiction, whatever
hmm
type of thing. So how do you handle that? Because it sounds like you're kind of a second chance guy under the right conditions.
yeah. So I look at it. I think I mentioned earlier in this conversation that I don't believe that your biography is your destiny. So
Right.
I have this belief, I have this philosophy that you could make really poor decisions and you could come out of that a better person, and you could probably make some really good decisions in your future. Now, I've met people that have done horrible things, and for reasons that would just not be, you know it all, we couldn't deal with it. We would never bring those people on board because they wouldn't fit in the culture, and they would be a disruption, or they wouldn't help our customer, right? But to your point, and I just want to get to the essence of your question, I very much am somebody who, in an interview, I look for where people have failed, where they've taken anything from that failure, they've learned from it, they've applied it, and then they've improved in some sustainable way. One of my favorite questions I ask folks, whether they report to me or don't report to me, and I'm in the interview process, is, "Have you ever been fired from a job?" I love people who have been fired from a job. Number one, number one, if they're willing to admit it, and show me some humility, I know that we're going to be off to a good start. But here's the second reason: if you've ever been fired from a job, or if you've ever gotten knocked down, there's a feeling there of just complete devastation that is very hard to replicate in any other circumstance. And being fired really affects you. And when you are in a new job after you've ever gotten fired, you have this deeper level of appreciation. And I believe for those who walk away in the best sense of it, depending on why they were fired, you really remove this notion or this belief structure that you're entitled to having a job, which, again, we're talking about different generations. We find that in some generations versus others. So yeah, interview question I love asking: have you been fired? And for a variety of reasons, but I love people that come to the organization with a story.
Cool, cool. I'm curious, when as part of your interview process that you do in your organization, how do you test the relational skills? You know, how people will get along with other people that are going to be on their team or people they're going to interact with often.
So about 7 years ago, this is before I owned the company, but I was part of the leadership team and I was working with the CEO through the succession plan, et cetera. We took a page out of Google's book. Laszlo Bach wrote a book called Work Rules. Great book for all your listeners. In that book, he talks about how when he was running all of culture for Google, that they put a process in place that never allowed any person to be hired or fired by any one person. It was never a one-to-one relationship. To be hired at Google, you had to go through a committee. To be fired at Google, you have to go through a committee. And so we, again, 7 years ago, we instituted this for hiring. And we found that by making sure that every candidate went through a series of people that they would maybe be working with, people that they would not be working with in any way, shape, or form, and then people that were part of the leadership team, to get a good cross-section of that individual, it was really, really important to see multidimensionally how a candidate would fit. And that's a really big part of being hired in our organization, because we look for lifers, and we get criticized for this occasionally because people be like, oh, you're looking for people that just, they want a job for life. My response to that is, yeah, I want people that want to go all in on our business, and they want to transform with us, and they want to learn, and they want to experience things. And even if they want to leave and come back, I'm open to that. I'm good with that, but I'm building a lifelong relationship here. So we need to take a couple extra steps through those interview processes to make sure that we're seeing it from a variety of different angles, because I'm going to see what I see. My VP of people, she's going to see things from her angle. And then if I have even like a network technician that needs to work with that individual, I want their perspective too. So we try to, in every circumstance where we're hiring somebody, we try to make sure that there's at least 5 or 6 people. Candidates hate it because they can't predict it. It also drags out the recruiting process, but we found that it's ROI positive in the long run.
So how long does it typically take from resume receipt to offer in your organization?
It's usually about 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, that's a long time.
It's a lengthy process, especially when we need to fill an open requisition quick, where we'd love to fill that within 2 weeks. Hiring somebody in a 2-week window, I don't remember the last time that happened for any role. It takes a long time at Innovative.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, with Laszlo's approach, don't they also have some people that participate in the interviews that, I forget his term, but they're like advisors?
Yes.
Where they can give advice, whereas other people, it's like, if I say no, they're out.
Yep. You're absolutely right. And I know exactly what you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah. So that was an interesting distinction, but I think it makes a lot of sense. I remember, if you read one of Lencioni's recent books, I think he was talking about a great team player or something like that.
I was going to say team player. Yep.
Yeah. And remember who exposed the bad potential VP or whatever it was? It was the receptionist.
Right. Where you would never, who would know? Right. Exactly.
Yeah. But she caught on. I think it was that he didn't remember her name, and he didn't, he was kind of distant or rude to her, whereas he was Mr. Engagement otherwise. He was an awesome poser.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I'm curious, this has been a great talk. I feel like we could go on for a long time, but any closing comments you'd like to give our audience, and also how to get a hold of you if they'd like to reach you?
Yeah, so I'm probably most active on LinkedIn. I post frequently and my posts are on a variety of different topics, ranging from culture to how we're operating the business to our partnerships to our customers. But I love connecting with folks on LinkedIn. It's Justin Copie, Copie. And I think for your audience, I love when people give me their perspective, even if it's completely opposing. So I would encourage anybody to message me if you're interested in having a conversation. Would absolutely love to do that. I'm a lifelong learner, and I really, really, really appreciate the opportunity here to talk to you today.
Oh, you've been great. Thank you so much for your time, Justin. I'm sure the audience got a lot of great things out of this talk, and maybe we'll have you back sometime because I'm sure we just got the tip of the iceberg today.
Thank you so much.